Hello, Prestige heads, and welcome to American Prestige's weekly question and answer session. I'm here with Danny, as always. Thanks, everybody, for participating and for watching, listening. Well, I guess I don't know if you can listen to this without watching, and I guess it's on video only. I don't know. I'm still learning this shit, this video stuff. But before we get into the question, I wanted to say, first of all, thanks to everybody who's been writing, reviewing the show and writing, writing reviews and leaving, 5-star reviews for us on Apple Podcasts and, wherever you do that sort of thing. It really helps the show out a lot. So thanks for doing that. And if you haven't done that and you would like to leave a nice review for us, not a bad review, we don't like those, but if you want to leave a nice review for us, please do that. It helps the show out a great deal. Also, just to recap, I do this every time we do one of these, but if you are not subscribed to American Prestige as a paid subscriber supporting the show, please consider doing that. Those of you who are paid subscribers, if you want to participate in the Q&A, all you have to do is sign up for the American Prestige Discord, which you should have access to as a paid subscriber, and then you can leave us questions in the Q&A room, and we will pick one every week and answer it here on video, because this is what the young people like, I'm told, is to watch people talk on video. I don't get it myself, but it's not my business. Danny, let's get into it, shall we?
Let's.
All right, so we've got a question from Vijay Govind Nath. Sorry if I mispronounced that in any way, but his question is, I've heard Mr. Bessner say several
Doctor.
times that he believes, yes, we picked this because of the respectfulness, although it should be Dr. Bessner, but yes, we've heard him say several times that he believes Fukuyama was right about liberalism, but isn't liberalism breaking apart in a way that seems difficult to repair now? I understand that Mr. Bessner believes that there
Doctor.
isn't really a political philosophy or orientation that can successfully challenge liberalism yet. But does that mean liberalism itself won't disintegrate? This question was inspired by the news about the Saudis making a mobile McDonald's for Trump. And Danny, at the risk of stealing I think your answer is going to be, this is very timely. People will find out why in a few days. But I think your answer is that Fukuyama was right that we're at the end of history. He wasn't right about liberalism. He was right about the end of history, and the thing that is encompassing everything at the end of history is capitalism. It's not liberalism. Am I
Right.
on the right road
Yeah.
here?
So I think there was this consensus that was particularly powerful in the 70s and the 80s, which is when Fukuyama really came of intellectual age, which was that there was a profound connection between basically what was called in the United States a liberal democratic capitalism. And this was a form of ideology that emerged around the mid-century period. Some historians like Mel Leffler argues that it traces back even earlier than that, but really became consensus in the middle of the 20th century that the ideology of the United States was this thing called liberal democratic capitalism. And there was this idea, sometimes articulated and sometimes not articulated, that those three things went together, that liberalism and democracy and capitalism were mutually reinforcing. And that over time, if you did one, you would get the other. This is, of course, I think most evident in the 2000s. I think it was literally the year 2000, the U.S.-China Relations Act, which I believe was the idea that China was given most favored nation trading status when it joined the WTO. That is to say, when it became part of sort of this globalized capitalist economy. And one of the reasons that Bill Clinton and others supported that idea was the notion that economic liberalization would engender a form of political liberalization, that Tiananmen's dreams would eventually be realized with by sort of the liberalization of the economy. And there were similar arguments made about Russia in the post-Soviet period and other areas of the world. This was actually a big part of U.S. geostrategy in the 1990s and 2000s. So I think that Fukuyama was both right and wrong, as you suggested, Derek. I think he was wrong in the sense that I don't think liberal precepts now govern politics mostly around the world when it comes to politics. I don't think that Russia is a politically liberal society. I don't think that China is a politically liberal society. One could even argue, though I don't really buy this, to be honest, but some people argue, I still think the United States is basically liberal, at least at the time of speaking. Trump
It's
hasn't since.
aspirationally liberal, at least. I mean, Trump
Yeah.
Trump is a
Go.
different thing, but um, Biden, Obama, like all these guys talk about upholding liberal values, even if they don't necessarily do it. As I say, Trump is different, but I think that matters. And people roll their eyes and say, "Well, who cares what they say?" But I think it does matter that you're sort of still talking. You still talk about these things and aspire to them, even if it's just in a rhetorical sense.
Well, and
Sorry, go
also
ahead.
Trump isn't sending in his goons to shut down the New York Times, right? Which is like that isn't happening,
Well, it's early,
at
but
least
yeah,
as of yet.
it's only been four
Yeah.
months,
Yeah, but that would be something different. That would be a genuine thing that, has only happened in this country really during a declared war.
right?
And if it happens, or, maybe a little bit in McCarthyism, but if something like that happens, then we're in genuinely something new and different.
This is why I harp on sometimes that I think we're approaching a point where Trump just openly says, "I don't care what the courts tell me to do. I'm not doing it." And like that's going to matter. Like he's not doing it right now. Like he hasn't gotten Kilmar and Abrego Garcia out of El Salvador. Like he's
Well, he
not
only has to
following.
facilitate it if he
Right,
can,
right.
right?
I mean,
Yeah.
they're playing these
They
picky
they
end
give
games,
him
which
wiggle
which
room, yeah.
in itself is an indication that he's not broken with liberalism because he's still trying to play these word games to kind of slip under the wire and say, no, no, I'm in compliance with the court ruling. I think the point where he finally, which I do believe we're going to get to, the point where he finally just says, "Fuck off, I'm not listening to you," is going to be a milestone because of that, because it will be an open break with this idea that we're upholding liberalism.
Yeah,
But sorry, go
which has
ahead.
happened very, very rarely. I think it's happened like two. I think if I'm remembering correctly, it definitely happened under Nixon for a time, and definitely happened under Andrew Jackson. And I think it might have also been under Lincoln, though I'm less sure about that third one when the president just said, "I don't care. I'm not following what the court says," and that would be a genuinely like a break, and that would be really interesting because of course the military believe its officers, they take an oath to the Constitution, not to the personality of the president, right? My understanding is that that was a Cold War thing, that they take an oath to the Constitution. And I actually don't think that would be nothing, to be honest. I'm not sure that everyone in the military would just be fine with Trump openly defying a judicial order. It's difficult to know precisely what would happen, but that I think would raise the heat on things. But anyway, back to the question. So Fukuyama was wrong in the sense that people aren't liberal, but he was right about two things. One, there has been no ideological challengers to liberalism, and again, I'm exploring this now in this piece. I'm thinking through this notion of a post-ideological age, where the ideologies of the 19th and 20th century are just less important in people's lives. They're less causal in shaping what people do. But he was, I think, right in the implicit argument about capitalism, and that capitalism as a form of organizing an industrial and post-industrial political economy is really the only game out there right now, unless you're in North Korea. And North Korea arguably relies on a state capitalist China to survive. And so this to me is important because I do think that there are some fantasies on the left about, China. I mean, China is going to challenge the United States in terms of security and foreign relations, and in terms of U.S. hegemony in East Asia. I think that's absolutely happening, but it doesn't seem like China is going to challenge the United States on the premises of capitalism. It has a different form of capitalism, certainly, uh, less market oriented, more state oriented. The state really does step in a way that it doesn't quite do in the United States, even if in this country the state does set the rules of the road and kind of the strictures on what counts as free markets and what doesn't count as free markets. China more directly steps into things and more directly channels investments, not just giving incentives, but just saying you're going to invest here. And that's it's certainly a different form of capitalism, but I would argue it is capitalism. Now, is Xi Jinping using this in order to foster socialism and communism? I don't know. It doesn't seem like that's in the immediate offing. But in that sense, I do think that Fukuyama was correct, and that he never meant, and this is just sort of like an ignorant criticism, he never meant that things were going to stop happening. That's not what the end of history meant. And so when people say that, it's sort of a bit silly. And when they say like history has started again, that's not, they're not talking on Fukuyama's terms. But I think that he was mostly correct in his reading of what the collapse of the Soviet Union meant. And I believe that essay was pretty prescient. It came out, I believe, in the summer of '89, before the Berlin Wall even came down, which people generally date the beginning of the end of the Cold War to the fall of the wall in November '89. So I think it's a pretty smart essay and a pretty correct essay. I don't know what you want to add to that, Derek. Again, we have a very special guest, wink, on this episode Sunday, that
That's a
everyone's
little
going to have
spoiler alert.
to
Yeah. Read
everyone's
between
going
the
to have
lines.
to subscribe to the podcast to listen to, but we might talk about these things with someone who knows a little bit about it. So Derek, I don't know, what's your take on this hot issue?
I mean, I agree. I think that it's we don't it's not even that there's no obvious alternative to the capitalist system out there, whereas we see, all these different, kinds of political structures emerging, illiberal democracy, which I guess is sort of, uh, a challenge to liberalism, although it still operates on liberalism's terms, I think. But in terms of the economic system, in terms of the way society is structured, it's still these countries are still very capitalist. Turkey, Hungary, Russia, whatever. And you have alternatives. You have sort of the state plays a much stronger role in China than it does in the United States. You have all these political alternatives, but we don't even consider. It seems like alternatives to capitalism. Like you hear, people write about the different political systems, but it's always in terms of who can deliver the best capitalism. Like what does capitalism mesh the best with? Is it, does China get points here because it can still build things that hasn't been stymied by all the things that seem to be stymieing any sort of progress in the United States and causing stagnation. But the progress is judged in terms of, how much money is everybody making? What's the inequality? What's the, how many high speed rail systems are you building? Or, it's all in terms of material acquisition and capitalist measurements, it seems like. So we don't even talk about ways that we could think about society that are more fundamental than liberal or not liberal, or democratic or not democratic. We don't talk about, like, should we place this much value on how much money do I have, what or how much economic success am I experiencing, versus other ways that you can imagine, other things that you could value. You can imagine valuing and structuring society in a different way that provides basic needs for everybody, and uh, it doesn't have everybody obsessed with what's my job, or what's the tariff rate, or all these things. And so yeah, it's like we don't even really have an alternative to that. We don't talk about alternatives to it. And I think, again, something we talk about in these Q&As a lot is, why does everybody feel a little bit on edge, or like they're losing their minds in
Constantly.
some
Yeah.
level? And it's because, like, the whole thing is empty. It's an empty shell at this point. Like, how much, all the structures, the real deep structures of the way we organize society are collapsing. I do think they're collapsing, or they're stagnating at least. But we don't even know. We can't even see that. We can't even see beyond the debate over, should it be should we tweak it this way or tweak it that way politically, to look at some of these bigger picture things and what we've done with, with the way we live our lives in a fundamental way. And so, it just exists. It just goes on as this behemoth that I think, doesn't have much energy to it, but we're stuck in it. And that's what makes people kind of feel, nuts, because they know something's wrong, but they don't even have the terminology, or they don't hear anybody talking about, how to fix it.
Yeah, and I think that's a way to think about capitalist realism is just an extension of the end of history argument. And we're still living in that moment. And then the question is that Gramsci quote, or like people argue, is it actually Gramsci? I'm not going to litigate that now about, we're the old world is dying, the new is not be born, now is the time of monsters. I mean, the new world might not be born ever. And so this is the question, is how do we identify the problem, and then how do we move through it? And I don't think it's, through identifying Trump as a fascist or laying the blame on the far right. Totally, they're clearly a part of it. But I think, like, really the hegemonic ideology of the last century, or almost a century at this point, is liberalism. And that's what's really coming apart. And it's the collapse of that I think has opened, or not opened, as the case may be, apertures. And that's what I think is the important thing to focus on, because it's the hegemony that is going away, and that nothing is here to replace it.
All right, I think that's a good place to leave it. Thanks everybody for participating. Thanks for watching the video. Be sure to like and share and subscribe and do all those
Review
great
the
things.
podcast. It's
Review the
free. Review the
podcast again.
podcast, and
Yes,
send it
does
to
help.
all your friends on YouTube, and subscribe on the YouTube. Also, yeah, subscribe on the YouTube as well. And please leave comments. We love reading them.
All right, thanks guys.